Record and turn the program over to Suba. Suba, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Trudy, for the welcome. And well, let me add my welcome to everybody that has zoomed in today. I am Suba Sati. I'm a volunteer community ambassador with AARP here in Northern Virginia. From our earliest beginnings, AARP has championed lifelong learning. That's why AARP Virginia is thrilled to bring you our third year of Tuesday Explorers, a lifelong learning program offered every Tuesday from January through the end of April, sort of winding down, at 3 o'clock Eastern Time for curious explorers. For more than 60 years, AARP has been a wise friend and fierce defender, helping individuals to ensure that their money, health, and happiness live as long as they do. AARP has earned a reputation as a wise friend and fierce defender through trusted information, tools, and advocacy designed to protect the health and financial security of older Americans and empower them to choose how they live as they age. By promising to act as a wise friend and fierce defender, AARP is helping people who are 50 plus and their families feel confident, in control, and secure as they age. As a wise friend in your corner, AARP helps you protect yourself and your loved ones from fraud, get healthy and stay healthy, care for loved ones, make connections, plan a trip, learn new technologies, and attend a class and have fun like we are going to do today with our Tuesday Explorers program. I hope you will continue to take advantage of these opportunities and more. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest today, Ms. Kimberly Murphy, who is president of the Berks Nature in Reading, PA. Let me tell you a little bit about Kim. Kim joined Berks Nature, then Berks Scout Conservancy in January 2004. As president, she works with a dedicated staff to improve and protect our land and water resources, to educate the community about land use and its implications, and to connect people to nature, thus conserving Berks County unique cultural and environmental resources for the benefit of future generations. To fulfill that mission and to better address the changing needs of their constituency, Kim led the organization through a name change in 2015, changing the Berks County Conservancy to Berks Nature. Berks Nature recently completed a nearly $5 million capital campaign to raise money for a new nature center. The Nature Place, which opened in September 2017 and has achieved LEED Gold certification. In 2018, they opened a nature preschool. In 2021, the organization received a $28.5 million operating endowment gift and embarked on a $4.5 million expansion of the Nature Place. My wife and I have been there several times. It's a wonderful place to visit. So if you're ever near the Reading, Pennsylvania area, please go visit Kim and her wonderful staff and the Berks Nature Center. So Kim, with that, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Suba. And thank you for inviting me to present today. I was going to introduce myself, but I guess Suba has done that. But let me just say to all of you, I am very excited about our topic today. It's something that we all, I think, have noticed and experienced relative to extreme weather. And I will tell you that I am a teacher by training. I am not a climate scientist, so I will do my best to share what I know and what our organization is doing to help folks understand the impact of our changing climate. So I would like to just share a little bit more about Berks Nature with you, talk a little bit about our State of the Environment program, which is what led us to explore climate change and weather and global warming. Talk a little bit about climate change and extreme weather, and then share a little bit about what you can do to help mitigate some of the challenges that we are seeing. And our country is, I hear from Trudy that there are people here from all over the country. Your experiences may be very different. Obviously, we're a very diverse country geographically, and so I look forward to having folks share their experiences as well. At Berks Nature, we believe that nature is essential to our quality of life. And as Suba mentioned, we are primarily a land trust where we work on land protection, protection of our water and watershed restoration. We have urban gardens in the city of Reading, and we have many programs that connect people to nature and provide environmental education. Here is a picture of the Nature Place. So we are coming to you from our new nature center. I can still call it new. We're only 5 years old. And we are, as Suba mentioned, a LEED Gold certified building for sustainability. LEED is the Leadership in Environmental Engineering and Design. There are land conservation organizations around the country. Assuming that many of you would be from Virginia, I just did a quick search of land trusts that are in Virginia, but there are certainly organizations throughout the country that do what we do in terms of land protection and watershed restoration. Oftentimes you'll see different organizations do the environmental education piece. We're kind of a hybrid in that regard. 15 years ago, we started a program called the State of the Environment. And the primary goal of the State of the Environment program was, and still is, to raise awareness of conservation choices that we can make in Berks County that will improve our local environment. And this effort has been a catalyst for conversation around these issues throughout the community. Here is an example of some of our previous publications. Every 5 years, we take a look at measuring 25 different indicators in and around the greater Reading area. And then just knowing that that data wasn't going to change significantly from year to year. On our off years, we've selected topics like growing native plants or healing in nature. And that brought us to this year, where we explored extreme weather and the effects of climate on everyday lives. So when Suba asked me to speak, I thought, well, I'll just translate our message from our State of the Environment program. So what is weather? Although related, climate and weather are two very different things. Weather is the specific condition of the atmosphere at a particular place and time, and it is measured in variables that might include temperature or precipitation, cloudiness, humidity, air pressure, wind. It often refers to short-term changes in the atmosphere. These are discrete events happening over maybe a few hours or days. So the temperature today, or an incoming thunderstorm, or high winds, all describe the weather. Climate is a little different. It describes the long-term average weather conditions of a specific region over a long period of time. In other words, climate is often what you expect, but weather is what you get. So more and more often, what we're getting is not what we're expecting. And that's because our planet's climate is changing, spurred on by increasing global temperatures. Global warming is the observed increase in average temperatures near the Earth's surface and in the lowest level of the atmosphere. So in common usage, global warming often refers to the warming that has occurred as a result of increased emissions of greenhouse gases from human activities. Global warming is a type of climate change, but it can also lead to other changes in the climate conditions, such as changes in precipitation patterns. Climate and extreme weather events, from heat waves and torrential rain to hurricanes and wildfires, are a consequence of our changing weather patterns, and they inflict a deep and recurring socioeconomic cost that threatens public health and our critical infrastructure and economic stability. So it has wide-reaching impacts that can affect food systems, water quality, social justice issues, tourism, national security, and human health. And in 2021, the United States was barraged with 20 billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. So, freezing temperatures that may have provoked power outages, historic drought paired with record-breaking heat waves, even catastrophic wildfires left a trail of destruction throughout our country. And collectively, these 20 disastrous events resulted in $145 billion in damages and 688 lives lost. So this is an estimate of the number or the percentage of adults throughout the United States who think that global warming is happening. It's about 72% nationally, and that is up from certainly from decades ago. In Virginia, about 74% of people believe that climate change is happening. Nationally, the average that people think global warming will harm them personally is about 47%. And in Virginia, that number is about 45%. So we're inching close to nearly half of our population believing that climate change or global warming will harm them personally. 64% nationally believe that global warming is affecting the weather. And in Virginia, that's about 67%. And then 2/3 of the US adults see extreme weather events happening more often. So you can see here, 59% in the Mid-Atlantic region, 34% in the South Atlantic believe that extreme weather events are happening more frequently. So why is this happening? As civilization advanced, we created energy and electricity, transportation, and all of these things were dependent on fossil fuels. And little did we know at the time that those fossil fuels were quickly accumulating in our atmosphere. So floating in the Earth's atmosphere, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane capture and retain heat, which warms the planet, making it habitable for life as we know it. However, human activities have added more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere than the planet is used to. And so more greenhouse gases trap more heat, which creates a warmer planet. So since the late 1800s, our planet has warmed about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit, according to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I just ask you to think about, how do you feel when you have a fever, when you're getting sick? And maybe your temperature goes from 98 to 100 or 101. You feel really crappy. And that's unfortunately what's happening to our Earth. Carbon dioxide concentrations are rising mostly because of the fossil fuels that people are burning for energy. Fossil fuels like coal and oil contain carbon that plants pulled out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis millions and millions of years ago. And now we're returning that carbon to the atmosphere in just a few hundred years. Since the middle of the 20th century, annual emissions from burning fossil fuels have increased every decade from an average of 3 billion tons of carbon, or 11 billion tons of carbon dioxide, to a year in the 1960s to 9.5 billion tons of carbon, or 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide in the 2010s. As we add more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, people are supercharging the natural greenhouse effect, which is causing global temperature to rise. And according to observations by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association Global Monitoring Lab, in 2021, carbon dioxide alone was responsible for about 2/3 of the total heating influence of all human-produced greenhouse gases. Another reason carbon dioxide is important in the Earth's system is that it dissolves into the ocean, kind of like the fizz in a can of soda, and it reacts with water molecules, producing carbonic acid and lowering the ocean's pH. So it basically raises the ocean's acidity. Methane concentration also contributes to the changing climate. It has more than 80 times the warming power of carbon dioxide, and over the first 20 years after it reaches the atmosphere. And even though carbon dioxide has a longer lasting effect, methane sets the pace for warming in the near term. And at least about 25% of today's global warming is driven by methane from human actions. Berks Nature does not take this position necessarily, but that's why you will hear sometimes some people saying we should all become vegetarians because cows produce a considerable amount of methane. This gives you an idea of the greenhouse gases by source. The largest of the greenhouse gases are transportation emissions. This gives you an idea of the global annual average temperature as measured over both land and oceans. As I indicated before, it's increased about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit to 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880. The red bar shows where temperatures above the long-term average, and the blue bar indicates temperatures below the long-term average. The black line shows atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration in parts per million. And while there is a clear long-term global warming trend, some years obviously do not show a temperature increase relative to the previous year, and some years show a greater change than others. And these year-to-year fluctuations in temperatures are due to natural processes like the effects of El Niños, La Niñas, and volcanic eruptions. So, according to the World Meteorological Organization, a weather event is considered extreme if it has a low probability of occurring at a given location and is typically of a high intensity. So there has been a 7-fold increase in the reported disaster losses from extreme weather since the 1970s. Extreme heat, stronger hurricanes, heavier downpours, drought, and that cost, as I mentioned before, is in the billions. Since the late 1800s, our temperature has increased by about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That may not seem like enough, but if you consider that during the Ice Age, some 11,000 plus years ago, Pennsylvania was covered with a frozen tundra similar to the modern day Arctic. And the global temperatures that supported these frigid conditions were just about 7 to 8 degrees cooler than the temperatures today. So you can see what a difference just a slight temperature, a degree or two can change. And that increase by the end of the century obviously melted the ice ages and rose sea levels to create the world that we live in now. If we use Pennsylvania as an example, the last 22 years have been Pennsylvania's hottest. Temperatures in the Commonwealth have risen almost 2 degrees since the beginning of the 20th century, and it's expected to warm another 5.9 by 2050. So that creates extreme heat and heat waves that are also on the rise. I can tell you that our summer days registering temperatures above 90 degrees have typically been rare for Pennsylvania, occurring maybe only 5 or so days a year on average. But by 2050, hot days with temperatures over 90 degrees or more are expected to occur about 37 times a year. Excuse me. So temperature varies with land use. Densely developed urban neighborhoods can sometimes run 10 degrees hotter. And so extreme urban heat is a public health threat to which low-income and minority communities are most vulnerable. An average temperature for Pennsylvania increase. As the temperatures for Pennsylvania increase, so too does the probability of and severity of this hot and extreme weather. It's not only uncomfortable, but it can be dangerous in communities where they may not have access to air conditioning or water. And it also can increase the prevalence of mosquito and tick-borne illnesses, affecting public health and our agricultural yields. The number of extreme storms and flooding have also increased. So the past 6-year period between 2015 and 2021 were Pennsylvania's wettest years on record. So not only is more rain falling in Pennsylvania, but the magnitude, the frequency, and intensity of extreme rainfall events are also increasing, sometimes dropping 2 or more inches of rainwater at a time. And the result of this new weather pattern is kind of counterintuitive. More extreme but irregularly timed rain events make Pennsylvania wetter, while dry drought conditions between storms are also expected to increase. And I can tell you the past several summers have been very odd in Pennsylvania. Berks County is a very heavy agricultural land use area, and you could see thriving farm fields with very green corn and crops, and just a mile or so away, you could see an extremely different condition on another farmer's farm. And part of that was because the weather events that we got were very sporadic. So they were very intense in certain neighborhoods and then no rain in other neighborhoods for long periods of time. So thunderstorms are formed by warm rising air, and the amount of energy available for this rising air is called the convective available potential energy, or CAPE. And the higher the CAPE, the higher the thunderstorm potential. So it basically describes the instability of the atmosphere and provides an approximation of the strength within a thunderstorm. Recent warming from climate change has not only generated more warm, moist air, but it has also increased CAPE values, particularly in the eastern United States. And it's kind of difficult to quantify the impact this has because extreme storms are complex and they're very local and they're short-lived. However, large amounts of warm, wet air combined with higher CAPE values are 2 factors that help explain why Pennsylvania has gotten wetter. And of course, more heat equals more unstable atmosphere. This slide shows the annual thunderstorm potential of change in the CAPE days, with CAPE convective available potential energy at or above 1,000. So more moisture equals heavier rains. The rain events are becoming more frequent and more intense. And as I mentioned earlier, the impacts include crop damage or soil erosion and increased flood risk. Something else that we don't think about as much, but we alter the landscape, and that makes our communities more vulnerable to flooding. In Berks County, Pennsylvania, more than 12% of our land is classified as impervious cover. Some more urban areas are much higher than that, but an impervious surface refers to all hard surfaces like a paved road, parking lots, roofs, and even very highly compacted soils like sports fields, for example. And the problem with impervious surfaces is that they prevent the natural soaking of rainwater into the ground and then slowly seeping into streams. And by preventing that, then the impervious cover increases runoff during storm events. And that's when you get, stormwater issues and pretty significant flooding. Heavier rainfall equals flashier floods. So more frequent flash flooding events, they come on faster. This reduces our ability to have any kind of warning lead time and time to employ safety measures. Flash floods are the greatest threat to drivers. Vehicle submersions account for up to 10% of all drownings in high-income countries, and your vehicle can sink within 2 to 4 minutes. I live in a very rural area, but our property is along the Tulpehocken Creek, and we are at the very end of a Army Corps of Engineer flood project. So when we get heavy rains, the Army Corps does not let the Blue Marsh Lake drain, and that floods into the upper Tulpehocken by our house. And the first thing to flood is the street right in front of our house. And I am amazed at the number of people who just think they can drive through this water. And their cars spin around, they get stuck. It's extremely dangerous. So if you find yourself in a flash flood situation, know your risk. Basically, anywhere that it can rain, it can flood, and make sure that you are prepared. You can't control the weather. We'll talk a little bit about this later, but you can prepare for it. And flooding is one of the most common and costly natural disasters. And interestingly, only 3% of Virginians have flood insurance. It's estimated that only an inch of water in a home can cause upwards of $25,000 in damages. So know your risk and be prepared for it. Extreme heat and drought increases threaten agriculture. So in Berks County, that's the second biggest we are the second biggest crop producer in Pennsylvania. Agriculture is among the number one industry in Berks County, and extreme heat and drought increases the threat. Heat exposure alone nationally led to 470 billion labor hours lost globally in 2021 in the agriculture sector. So this is a drought monitor map. You can go online and look at it. They change it, I think, every week or so. This was just recently released this week. But this drought monitor summary map identifies general areas of drought and then labels them by intensity. D1 is the least intense level. D4 is the most intense level. And we generally, there's a description that's included on the map of what the primary physical effects are for both short-term and long-term drought. So I don't know if you can see closely enough on the screen, but there are letters. S for short-term, which means that the drought will be typically less than 6 months. L, for example, there's an L in Southern California, an L in Michigan, that long-term drought possibilities of typically more than 6 months. And there are areas that are also labeled SL. So if you find that interesting, you can Google the U.S. Drought Monitor and go on and take a look at that. There are stronger hurricanes that we are seeing. They are, I think, most importantly, rapidly intensifying. 80% of all the major hurricanes undergo rapid intensification. So they are becoming extremely stronger, and that is happening faster. If you look at this map, this is not just a coastal concern. The dark red area shows where the tropical cyclone cost has exceeded 125 billion since 1980. But 85% of all the US tropical cyclone fatalities between 2016 and 2018 were water related, but mostly it was inland flooding. Only 4% of those fatalities were due to storm surge related. So, if you may think about, oh, I don't live along the coastline, that's not an issue for me, but it can be. And again, I've talked a little bit about the disasters that are costing us more and more money. So these different colors and lines represent different years. So for example, on the bottom in the light blue is 2012, and the top in the purple is December 2017. And then the gold and the green are Decembers 2022 and 2021. So we certainly have not had in some of the most recent storms the most expensive disasters, but we are that is increasing. We've sustained about 348 weather and climate disasters since 1980 that have reached or exceeded $1 billion for the cost of that particular disaster. And this map gives you a sense of where and what those disasters were. So you can see that they are wide ranging from drought to wildfires to tornado outbreaks to extreme cold and winter, hailstorms, and extreme hurricanes, as well as thunderstorm events. There are also fewer days between disasters. So disasters above $1 million are occurring more frequently. In the last 5 years, there were just 18 days on average between billion-dollar disasters. In 1980, it was 82 days between billion-dollar disasters. So less time between disasters means less time and resources available to respond, recover, and prepare for future events. There are also risks to our mental health. Stress and climate anxiety lead to reduced well-being. It might lead to injury, displacement, job loss. For example, in Houston, 1/4 of the residents impacted by Hurricane Harvey in 2017 had PTSD symptoms 3 months after the event. And the average number of weather-related power outages is increasing by roughly 78% in 2011 to 2021 as compared to 2000 to 2010. 58% of those power outages were caused by severe weather, such as high winds and rain and thunderstorms. 22% were caused by winter weather, and then others were caused by tropical storms or extreme heat. So what does this mean for you, for me, for our communities? We're starting to better understand what to expect from our weather, and now we need to focus on adaptation, resiliency, and preparation. This was an interesting toolkit that I found online, the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. It's a website designed to help people find and use tools and information and subject matter expertise to help build climate resilience. So it offers information from all across the United States federal government, and it's all in one kind of easy to use location. It helps you step through exploring different hazards, assessing your vulnerability and risks, investigate options, prioritize and plan, and then how you might take action. And the goal is to improve people's ability to understand and manage their climate-related risks and opportunities, and help their communities and businesses be more resilient to extreme events. There are tools out there to look at models that can project potential risk. So there's a tool out there called the Sturgeon Seas Risk Zone Model, and this is the current coast of Virginia. You can see Philadelphia in the top right-hand corner, Virginia Beach kind of in the bottom. This change between this slide and my next slide is pretty subtle, but watch the coastal areas because this shows the current situation, and this shows with a 5-foot sea level rise, what lands are impacted. You can see that shaded areas. So I'll go back to current model, and this is the areas that are being affected with just a 5-foot rise in sea level. The crops that we grow for food need specific conditions to thrive, including obviously the right temperature and enough water. So changing climate could have both positive and negative effects on crops. The northern parts of the United States have generally cool temperatures, so warmer weather could help certain crops grow. But in southern areas where temperatures are already hot, even more heat could hurt the crop growth. The hardiness zone, which I remember from the back of, like the burpee seeds, where you see different colors of when you're supposed to plant certain plants, which is used by most gardeners to determine where plants are most likely to thrive at a particular time, has changed. The increase in the zone really allows for an expanded palette of plants, but it also shows that the climate is changing and there is greater unpredictability with regard to future weather. Certain kinds of air pollutants like ozone can make asthma and other lung conditions worse. So ozone is found in high in the atmosphere, and that's called the good ozone because it protects life on Earth from the sun's harmful rays. But ozone can also be found close to the surface of the Earth where it's considered bad ozone. And that's the main ingredient of smog, and it's obviously harmful for people to breathe. Bad ozone forms during really warm weather when pollution from vehicles and power plants and other sources heats up, and it's making it hard for some people to breathe. You can check the daily air quality forecast by looking in the newspaper or the television or on weather websites, and you can also find air quality alerts at airnow.gov. When ozone levels are high, you should be careful about exercising outside or working outdoors. Climate change might allow some infectious diseases to spread. As winter temperatures increase, ticks and mosquitoes that carry disease can survive longer throughout the year. This is a big issue for Pennsylvania. We virtually had no winter this year. I think we had 2 very modest snowfalls. And it never really got very cold for very long. So mosquitoes and ticks are something that we need to be concerned about here, now seeing year-wide, year-long. So people who are at greater risk for Lyme disease and West Nile disease who spend time outside, you really need to check yourself for ticks and take extra care during the peak mosquito biting hours. Don't leave standing water near your house because that can be a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So what are some things that you can do to help make life better? In some areas, municipal governments are finding proactive ways to mitigate the risk posed by climate change and extreme weather. They've passed new ordinances that can help them manage stormwater. Maybe restricting what structures can be built in a floodplain, limiting the amount of impervious cover, supporting the natural function of riparian buffer zones, and that is the zone on either side of a creek, maybe 15 to 100 feet or so. Adaptive action is required, and so this photo is an example of a stormwater bump out where maybe a few parking spaces were taken off a street to create a vegetated island to help absorb stormwater and carbon with the trees. Planting native trees and bushes near offices and homes provide shade and keep them cool naturally. If you are able, plant a tree or support organizations that plant trees. During photosynthesis, trees and other plants absorb carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen. And they're really an integral part of the natural sort of atmospheric exchange here on Earth. A single tree can absorb approximately 1 ton of carbon dioxide during its lifetime. And just like people, plants and animals will have to adapt to climate change. Many types of birds in North America are already migrating further north as the temperature warms. And you can help these animals adapt by protecting and preserving their habitats with native plants. I just learned this a couple of years ago and I thought it was fascinating, but baby birds cannot be fed seed. They must eat worms and or caterpillars that their mother feeds them shortly after they've been born. And in some cases, a particular bird requires a particular single worm or caterpillar type. And those worms and caterpillars require a specific type of plant to live on. And so if you take away that plant, then you take away that caterpillar, and then you take away the bird species that can live on that. For example, monarch butterflies require milkweed in order to reproduce and grow. Some mammals have very specific adaptations that are required. It's going to be very difficult for them to avoid the effects of climate change. They need places to hide, eat, drink, and breed. And in many cases, these places are very distinct and may change seasonally. And then, of course, our amphibian species have very narrow tolerance for temperature changes, and that can affect their breeding. Green your commute. A green commute is any form of commuting that does not involve just a single passenger alone. So transportation causes a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So if you walk, cycle, take transit, wherever you can, maybe save your errands for one trip, carpool. A report by Climate Communications states that over 76% of Americans drive alone to work every day. And this causes traffic and congestion on the roadways that we all affectionately know as rush hour. Try to trim your waste. Garbage that's buried in landfills produces methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. So we can keep stuff out of the landfills by composting kitchen scraps, garden trimmings, recycling paper, plastic, metals, and glass. We have a municipality here that created a yard waste collection program. I think there are many communities that do that now. And so they compost their whole community's yard waste, which is collected like trash in a special brown bag. And then all of that vegetation is staying out of the landfill. Try to be energy efficient. We can change our light bulbs to LEDs. You can unplug electronics when they're not in use. Wash your clothes in cold or warm water. Hang out your clothes if you're able to do that. Just installing a programmable thermostat can make a big difference. You can program it to become cooler at night or when you're not at home. And just installing weather stripping or caulking around your doors and windows can lower your heating costs by up to 25% by reducing the amount of energy that you need to heat and cool your home. Buy locally grown and produced foods. The average meal in the United States travels 1,200 miles from the farm to your plate. So buying locally will help save fuel and keep money in your community. Encourage the use of reusable water bottles instead of single-use plastic water bottles. About 60 million plastic water bottles end up in landfills every day. Here at the Nature Place, we do not allow the use of single-use plastic bottles on our campus. So if you're renting our facility, you can't walk in with a case of single-use water. We have glasses that we'll provide you. We have bottle refilling stations along the trail and on every floor of our building. Reducing plastic use is really going to be the most effective means of avoiding this waste. Recycling is obviously good, but about 91% of our plastic isn't recycled at all. And if left alone, this plastic doesn't really break down. It just breaks up into tiny little pieces that are known as microplastics, and then they end up in the water, they're eaten by wildlife, and they end up inside our bodies. Keep your car tuned up. Regular maintenance helps improve fuel efficiency and reduces emissions. You can check your tires to make sure that they're properly inflated. And just to recap, I hope I shared with you a little bit about Berks Nature, our State of the Environment program, how we got to extreme weather and climate change, the effects of climate change and extreme weather, and what you can do to help make life better. I want to give a shout out to Lauren Casey, who is a meteorologist with Climate Central. She was our State of the Environment speaker in November of 2022. And she shared her expertise and a lot of information from Climate Central with us as part of her presentation. And this is just these are some resources. Again, a big shout out to Climate Central. They have a lot of materials on climate change, but as I mentioned earlier, there's some great resources that are either provided by NOAA or NASA or, on the federal websites. You can go to our website, berksnature.org. If you look under education, you will find a box titled State of the Environment, and you can find all of our State of the Environment publications from the past 15 years are located in that location. And again, I want to thank you for your time and attention. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I'm happy to entertain any questions that people may have.
Yeah, Kim, one of the questions we had, I think you answered it, but just to reiterate it, the question was how much recycling actually gets recycled? And if I heard you correctly, I think you said 91%.
Yes, so 91% of plastics get recycled. So that is not, I don't offhand know the number of, like, if you recycle, how much of that actually gets recycled. I think that's, the markets for recycling change, and we rely on countries to take our recycling and process it. But of all the plastics that are created, only 91%, or 91% of those are not recycled.
And one of the questions was, could we put the link for the toolkit in the chat box, which I looked up very quickly and did that. So that is in the chat box. Right. And I have it as toolkit.climate.gov. And let's go over here. What, if any, significant positive things can be expected with climate change?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because a lot of times this topic is somewhat doom and gloom. I think the positive aspects are becoming aware and just acclimating and preparing your life to accommodate the potential for extreme storms. The changes in temperature don't necessarily mean a bad thing for every area. As I mentioned, it may provide the availability to grow certain plants and things that you aren't able to grow now because of what your climate is. But I think, just like all of you explorers are doing today, educating yourself and then making the choices that work best for you and your community. And together we can, hopefully make a big change.
And I think that answers the next question, which was, what are the most impactful and reasonable, simple actions individuals can take to slow down global warming?
Yeah, I think those, things that I mentioned in terms of, just simple things, native plants, planting trees, Americans love their lawn, and the lawnmower is one of the, highest polluting small machines that we operate. And so, looking at if you are in a property that you control, how can you add native plants and species to that that really encourages a place for wildlife to find refuge would be great. But you can also, do that container gardening on a patio as well, and planting a native plant to your region and see what it attracts in terms of insects and birds and butterflies. It's amazing how quickly that can change.
And one other question is, any hints for having reasonable, sane discussions with folks who don't believe any of this?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. And we don't get involved at Berks Nature in a lot of policy just by virtue of being a nonprofit organization, and that's not what our focus is. But there are definitely people out there who don't believe that climate change is happening, or that they believe that it's a natural process and that humans are not contributing to it. I told my dad, who is 83 and lives in Florida, that I was doing this session today, and he said, "Don't scare everybody. Don't scare the old folks, Kimberly," he said. So clearly he and I have different opinions about climate change. I think just, research your resources, try to present the facts. And what I've found is, I think most challenging is talking about the cause. Most people will observe that something is happening. Not everyone agrees on what the cause of that is.
We've got so many folks joining us from across the nation. Does Berks Nature offer a virtual tour? Is that on your website?
I know we have a you can go in and look at each of the rooms in the building. I don't know if we actually have a virtual tour, although we've done them. We may have one on our YouTube channel. I could get back to you with that information, and we'd love to have you check out the Nature Place. We're very proud of it, and we get thousands of kids here and adults here every year, just learning more about nature.
Very good. And we've put the link to the Berks Nature on the chat box for you. And Suba, unless you see something that I've missed, I think I've covered the questions.
Yes, you did, Trudy. Thank you. Kim, thank you. So one thing I learned today, I'd never thought about it till you showed me the picture of all the pavement and that how that can be helped by putting some plants there that can take the runoff. And I'm going to be seeing more of that. And I also thought of another thing. Retired military, so go to the hospital at Belvoir, and at the eatery there, they do a lot of styrofoam. So I'm going to be talking to the manager, because I saw your graph about styrofoam never dies.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk to the cafeteria manager about, hey, can you get another substitute for all the styrofoam that you're serving your food in? So I've already written that note down, just trying to do, my little part.
Great.
Yeah. So anyway, on behalf of AARP Virginia, I'd like to thank again our guest speaker, Kim. This was very enlightening for all of us. We'd love to get your feedback on today's program and ideas for future programs. In the chat box, you'll see a link to a survey. Please click on the link and take a few moments to share your feedback with us. We'll also send this link in a follow-up email later today. And Kim, we are getting a lot of comments today about your excellent presentation. So besides this Q&A and all that, you're getting dynamite reviews. Our Tuesday Explorer programs will continue next week, and we invite you to join us next week. So next Tuesday, which is April the 18th at 3 o'clock, it'll be a virtual tour of the Army Museum right here in Northern Virginia. So please join us for that. And of course, in the chat box, you'll see a link to register for our upcoming programs. And that is www.local.arp.org or local.arp.org. So thanks again, Kim, for joining us from Pennsylvania. Hope to see you soon. And until next time, we encourage you to stay curious and keep exploring. Thank you, folks, for joining us from all over the country. Have a great, wonderful rest of the day.
Hey, Suba and Trudy, did you guys get my text?
Oh, wow, you got it to us. Okay.